What's up, you guys? Normally, the information I share with you guys, I consider tea and gossip. And although it may be true, it's just for entertainment purposes. But today we have a much more serious story about Wendy Williams, the woman who created the genre of urban celebrity news that a lot of us are entertained by. Blogger Choke No Joke shared on his social media yesterday that Wendy Williams is suing Wells Fargo for freezing her accounts. He actually broke this story before Daily Mail and Page Six and other big news outlets that report on Wendy Williams. And now the information he shared has become public information since the court documents from the lawsuit have been uploaded for public viewing. So shout out to Choke No Joke for his hard work and for caring about Wendy Williams as a person, not just a brand. And shout out to my subscriber who actually sent me these court documents. Before we get started, if you're watching this video and you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe today, hit the bell button, and switch it to all so that you're notified of all of my videos. Before we look at these court documents, I also want to explain what is going on with Wendy Williams and Wells Fargo so that you can understand why so many shocking stories have been leaking about Wendy Williams lately. Wendy Williams allegedly hired a wealth manager at Wells Fargo to manage her accounts. And instead of working with Wendy, it appears that person is working against Wendy and essentially working for Debmar Mercury and has caused Wells Fargo to freeze Wendy's bank accounts in order to pressure Wendy Williams to return to her talk show. These are all allegations, of course, but it's being alleged that Debmar Mercury is watching the ratings dip for the Wendy Williams show in her absence. And of course, they're not happy about it. So Debmar Mercury are allegedly the ones leaking the shocking stories about Wendy Williams' mental health so that Wells Fargo has proof, quote unquote proof, that Wendy has dementia and should not have access to her own money. Like when the story broke that Wendy Williams was found in her birthday suit playing with herself and yelling expletives at her team, that incident allegedly happened in 2020, but it wasn't leaked until 2022. Because back in 2020, Wendy Williams was still hosting her show. She was a mess, but she was still present and hosting her show from home and later from the studio. But now that Wendy is no longer hosting her show, ratings are reportedly down, and Debmar Mercury is allegedly pressuring Wendy to return. So they are allegedly leaking shocking, but possibly true, stories about Wendy in order to support Wells Fargo's decision to freeze her bank accounts. And that is putting pressure on Wendy to return to her show and prove that she is in sound mental health so that she can get access to her bank accounts back. It's a sinister strategy to get Wendy to return to her show, but it is how the entertainment industry works. Reportedly, Wendy Williams is doing much better. Her brother mentioned on his YouTube channel that Wendy is in Florida and is having family time, and it's just like old times with her, and her family is happy about that. So it seems as if Debmar Mercury is putting that pressure on Wendy now that she is healing. So now that you have the backstory on allegedly why this is going on and how Debmar Mercury is allegedly putting out these shocking stories to support Wells Fargo freezing Wendy Williams' bank accounts to kind of force her to come back to her show and prove that she has a sound mind, let's go ahead and get into these documents. So it's Wendy Hunter versus Wells Fargo Clearing Services, and it's an emergency petition for preliminary injunction, temporary restraining order, and other relief in aid of pending arbitration. And it says the petitioner, Wendy Hunter, by and through her attorneys, Miami Entertainment Law Group, by way of petition against respondents, Wells Fargo Clearing Services, brings this special proceeding pursuant to Article 4 of the Civil Practice Law and Rules for an order pursuant to Article 63 of that, preliminarily enjoining and restraining the respondent, who is Wells Fargo, and any of their agents, members, officers, employees, representatives, and anyone else acting on respondent, Wells Fargo's behalf, from freezing all of Wendy's accounts, including but not limited to personal, business, deferred compensation, and investment accounts, and interfering with her right to access her financial assets and statements pending a final binding decision by an arbitrator, and alleges as follows. So in the first section, they get into the parties. The petitioner is Wendy Hunter, and she's an individual residing in New York. And upon information and belief, the respondent, Wells Fargo, is a foreign limited liability company operating and existing under the laws of the state of New York. So they're showing that these are the parties and this is the proper venue. And then it gets into the facts common to all causes of action. On or about April 11, 2018, Wendy and Wells Fargo entered into an asset advisor agreement and a client agreement, collectively called the agreements. Upon information and belief, the purpose of the agreements is for Wells Fargo to provide brokerage cash services to execute securities trades with Wendy's accounts. Upon information and belief, Wells Fargo is in possession of several $1 million worth of funds which belong to Wendy Williams and are currently managed by Wells Fargo and or held in Wells Fargo's possession. For more than 2 weeks, Wells Fargo has denied Wendy Williams any access, whether online or otherwise, to her financial accounts, assets, and statements based on the advisement by petitioner's former financial advisor, Lori Schiller, that Wendy Williams was of unsound mind. Now, this is where the news about Wendy Williams' mental health comes into play, because they're saying that Wendy Williams is of unsound mind, and the news of these shocking stories is the proof. Despite Wendy Williams' termination of Schiller as her financial advisor due to Schiller's malfeasance in relation to Wendy Williams' accounts and Schiller's improper conduct in relation to their professional relationship, respondent, that's Wells Fargo, continues to rely on Schiller's advisement as support for its decision to deny Wendy access to her financial assets and statements. So even though Wendy fired this lady, is what they're saying, Wells Fargo is still taking this lady's advice regarding freezing Wendy's accounts. As additional support for its decision to keep Wendy Williams' accounts frozen, Wells Fargo references its authority under the agreement to, quote, pause or reject instructions for a proposed transaction pending judicial or administrative remedies should they suspect financial exploitation, dementia, or undue influence. That's why you see these stories about Wendy Williams having dementia. However, that provision is inapplicable in this instance for several reasons, including the fact that the petitioner, Wendy Williams, has not proposed a transaction for which Wells Fargo allegedly has the discretion to pause or reject. Wendy Williams didn't try to make a transaction for them to freeze her account. And even if the provision did apply, Wells Fargo is going beyond the scope of the authority granted by the provision, because Wells Fargo is completely denying Wendy the ability to access or even view, whether online or otherwise, her financial assets and statements, which Wendy Williams has requested for the purpose of ascertaining the current standing of her accounts, and which is not a transaction. Looking at your account online is not a transaction. Although pre-dispute arbitration is required under the agreements, given the imminent and irreparable harm, they talk about irreparable harm because when you can't pay your bills because your account is frozen, that affects your credit. And that's pretty much irreparable. Once it's affecting your credit, it is irreparable harm being caused by the respondent, being caused by Wells Fargo's actions. So Wendy seeks injunctive relief from this court pursuant to Article 63 of the CPLR. Now, we'll get into the request for relief. They said the legal standard is that Wendy Williams repeats and restates the allegations contained in the prior paragraphs of this petition as if set forth fully. Wendy Williams requests immediate preliminary injunctions. Whenever you see injunction, if you're not familiar, that means to stop doing something. She requests immediate preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders, preliminary enjoining and restraining respondent, Wells Fargo, and any of their agents, members, officers, employees, representatives, and anyone else acting on Wells Fargo's behalf from freezing all of her accounts, including but not limited to personal, business, deferred compensation, and investment accounts, and interfering with her right to access her financial assets and statements. While ordinarily the function of a preliminary injunction is to preserve the status quo until a final determination upon the merits can be made, there is no question that in a proper case, the Supreme Court has power as a court of equity to grant a temporary injunction. Now, a lot of this information kind of like repeats itself. So we're going to go ahead to section B. Petitioner is likely to succeed on the merits. They want to go ahead and get the injunction because they say Wendy Williams is likely to win her case. They say to establish a likelihood of success on the merits, all that is required is a prima facie showing of the right of relief requested. Moreover, it is well settled that a likelihood of success on the merits may be sufficiently established even where the facts are in dispute and the evidence is inconclusive. And if we skip down to section 23, they say, in this case, petitioner Wendy Williams is likely to succeed in establishing her right to a declaratory judgment because there is a bona fide controversy between Wendy Williams and Wells Fargo as to Wendy's right to access her financial assets and Wells Fargo's decision to deny her such access. Due to the adverse legal interest between Wendy and Wells Fargo regarding this matter, a judgment would settle the legal issue and finalize the controversy. Now, there are a couple more pages to this document, but I noticed they just repeat what they've already said. So this is the reason why Wendy Williams, or Wendy Hunter, I should say, is suing Wells Fargo because they've frozen her accounts, allegedly because they believe her to have dementia because of the shocking stories in the news about her. And allegedly, Debmar Mercury is the one releasing these shocking stories, which are old, which are 2 or more years old, because of the fact they want Wendy Williams to return to the show now that she's healing. They want her to return to the show and basically prove that she has a sound mind, and that way she'll get access to her funds again. Now, this is all allegedly, this is all what I heard, but y'all leave a comment and let me know what you think about what you just saw, the allegations you just saw. Leave a comment. As always, thanks for watching. Layla, tells it all.